What? Is this an NFL game or a college football FCS FBS fluffer match? What do you mean a team scored 63 points in week 15? And what do you mean that the team that scored 63 points had one of the worst offenses in the league? What the hell happened in this Chargers-Raiders game? Well, dear viewer, to understand that, we are going to have to go back. So, to give this the best context, we're going to start with the aggressors. You see, this Raiders team was kind of floundering this season. They opened up with a tight 1-point win over the Broncos before they got a dose of reality with a nice vacation in Buffalo to remind them why nobody vacations in Buffalo. They then had to make their yearly donation to the Mike Tomlin Above 500 cause, where they got their first matchup with the Chargers. Now, on paper, this should have been close. The Raiders had a worse offense with no real quarterback as they were deciding between Aiden O'Connell and Jimmy Garoppolo, but they had a relatively strong defense, while the Chargers had the more X-factory offense, with many seeing Justin Herbert as being a few pieces away of proving that he's a top 5 quarterback in this league, while their defense was struggling. Ultimately, these teams would be in the same boat, but this matchup, Aiden O'Connell's 8.1 QBR, getting sacked 7 times and losing 50 yards on those sacks, as well as an untimely pick, meant that the Chargers would hold on for a 7-point win. While this normally would just be a footnote for their season, it actually sets an unrealistic precedent for what was about to happen. They would, however, beat Green Bay somehow, which is punching way above their weight class for this season, before also beating the Patriots, which that wasn't a good team anyway, but they played them as close as the Packers before they would go to Chicago, a not particularly great Chicago at that, and would completely fold, cementing a theme that this team could actually play pretty well at home, but on the road would be terrible. And that would be proven again as they lost in a similarly brutal fashion to the Lions, as the management at this point had seen enough of the current head coach Josh McDaniels as they brought in the new era of Antonio Pierce, who seemed to immediately make a difference, as they'd have a big win against the Giants, their biggest win of the season up to this point, and even beat the Jets. Now, while this is the football equivalent of winning by default, things would return to normal with a loss to Miami and the Chiefs before managing to pull off another sneaky win against the bye week before putting on just a horrible performance against the Vikings. And I actually made a whole nother video about that, but 4 quarters, 0 points, and lost by 3. You gotta be thinking, man, were they just saving all of those points for something? And well, they might have been, as they were approaching a week 15 match against the Chargers. But how have these Chargers fared since beating the Raiders last? Well, I wish I could say things went well, but that was far from the case. After starting 2-2 and going into an early week 4 bye week, things had decidedly hit the fan. They would lose a close one to Dallas before going to Kansas City and getting throttled, and sure, they were able to beat Chicago and the Jets, but who wasn't, before going on a 3-game slide against the Lions, Packers, and Ravens, where after that they were able to squeak out a 6-point win against the Patriots, who were just struggling and way worse than the Chargers were, before in a brutal fashion losing to division rivals the Denver Broncos. And this team was sitting here on the brink of now going 5-8, and you could hear the calls from the stands questioning why there hasn't been a head coach being shown the business side of the pink slip. This was multiple years in a row of bottom dwelling, wasting what people thought was a generational talent at quarterback with Justin Herbert, and not just wasting, but in the game against Denver, he actually ended up getting injured, further riling up fans as they looked to their next week opponents and thought, look at what they did. After starting 3-5, they let go of their head coach, and even though they didn't immediately become playoff contenders, at least they showed the fan base they were willing to make changes to try to win games, which is when it appeared that the players had a devious idea. You see, the Raiders fired their head coach mid-season, and since then, despite their record going from 3-5 to 5-8, that's exactly where the Chargers were sitting anyway. But they had something the Chargers did not have: hope. So, what would they have to do but lose, and lose bad? So in paper, this week 15 matchup looked like 2 5-8 teams, neither looking particularly special. Heck, even the Raiders the week prior having a total goose egg, and the Chargers only putting up 7 points in the previous week, making you think that this would be a second close one between the two. But with everything aforementioned, the ball was kicked off, and before you had a chance to come back from the bathroom, the Chargers punter J.K. Scott was launching it over to the Raiders to start their drive. drive, where after a kick-catch interference moved the Raiders up to the 32, it began. The players' coup. 12 plays in 5 minutes and was all it took for this Raiders team to go up 7-0. Then the offense decided to step up, a couple good plays, and boom, fumbled the ball back on the plus side of the field. We're in short order, 14-0. One offensive play later, and they were handing the ball back to the Raiders on the 31-yard line. All according to plan, they would think to themselves that the Raiders suddenly had 21 points, where they've only scored that much in 2 games all season and had now put it up in the first 12 minutes. Before they realized they were making it a bit too obvious and had to kick it down a gear, where they were able to punt and decided to play a little bit of defense when they were about to force the second Raiders punt of the day, and were like, wait, weren't we supposed to be letting them win? So when that punt happened, they ran it a little bit and fumbled it back to the Raiders on the 14-yard line, and all of a sudden, in less than a half a play, the Raiders had now scored more than any other game this season. And not just that, they forced another 3-and-out, and it was just raining touchdowns. Heck, they even stopped them on 4th and 1 to get the ball back at the 49 to end the half of the touchdown, and somehow, one half of football led to it being 42-0 in an actual live NFL game. The Raiders now had more points than any 2 games combined. The Chargers coup was in full effect, and after the half, the Raiders get the ball back, and immediately it was 49-0 before the Chargers let the mask slip just a little bit with an easy pitch and catch for a 79-yard touchdown, while also holding the Raiders to 0 yards on the next drive. Just a small power play to show what was possible before punting it back and forth, where on another punt they were like, hey, I feel like letting them score 49 points won't really get the point across. So they immediately fumble 6, get the ball back, and throw a pick 6, and there you had it. In the blink of an eye, it was 63-7. More points in 3 quarters of play than any 3 games by the Raiders combined. Heck, even if you add up their last 5 losses, it would be outscored by this one game alone. And yeah, the Chargers would score 2 random garbage time touchdowns, as the Raiders were probably in shock, but the darndest part about all of this was how normal the Raiders returned to after this game. Yeah, they went 2-1 down the stretch from this point, but it wasn't all of a sudden driven by a dynamic offense, as they beat their future Super Bowl winning Chiefs by a touchdown, lost to the Colts, and beat the Broncos for a second time this year, which is why so many people speculated that this was a total team effort by the Chargers to collapse this game to get some organizational shakeup, and boy did that actually work out. After the game, obviously the head coach and general manager were both let go, opened up the search in the offseason to bring in Coach Harbaugh, and in 2024, fortunes had completely changed. The Raiders, with maybe a false sense of confidence coming off of this one win, would go 4-13 the next year with a notable 10-game losing streak and only scoring more than 20 points 6 total times, and not a single time breaking past 26 points. Meanwhile, the Chargers, now led by Harbaugh, pretty much got everything they wanted. A total turnaround, they ended the season 11-6, the best ranked defense with yards allowed, and Herbert playing some damn good football, and even a playoff berth, showing that maybe if your team is struggling, all they need is a successful coup.